Now let's see if it works. All right. Now I'm hoping this works. I'm hoping this works, or else I'll give up. I don't know what it is. I should be all right by now. I am hoping that it works right now because that would be awful. I had to redo the stream because it doesn't. My sound was not coming in well, and I'm hoping that the sound is fine. Now let me test something. Is my sound all right now? Do I have still sound? Yeah, I think I do. I bet you I do. I bet you I still have sound. All right. Well, that was just a test. I wanted to see if the sound would still work. Good now. All right. So thank you for helping me. Um, I don't know why it was crackling before. There's a really good microphone too. Um, yeah, Pure Palm. Um, yeah, I never. I've been having this problem for the last 2 months. I got a really good Bose microphone, and man, it's best microphone I ever had. But it's very sensitive. That's the one thing I've noticed about it, and I hope everything is now. Hey, thanks, Dave. Thanks for coming. The discussion site is going to be an extension of the live discussion surrounding the hijacked flights, and tonight is going to be a very invigorating discussion because it is the most divisive issue in all of 9/11 truth within the truth movement, and it's American Airlines Flight 77. I'm going to be talking about the specifics of this flight, the technical details, and of course the physical details, the anomalies, and as well as the divisive conspiracy issues that are often mistaken for evidence of the contrary. And I'm going to point out why um, this is a common mistake. And I don't blame people. Usually they say, well, you know what? It didn't look like a plane crash because there was so little plane debris. This is all going to be easily explained in a minute. And when I get to that, I'm going to wait near the end to explain this issue regarding little plane debris and why there was hardly any noticeable large plane debris as opposed to other plane crashes. But according to let's go by the specifics anyway. I'm going to be sharing a couple of documents and files with you in the description box, maybe even in the comments section. I got a number of different reports that I want to share with you because, I don't want you to just believe me. I want you to know something because you could believe whatever you want. Knowing is action. And we need to build a new truth movement based on action, based on knowledge, not on belief. Belief is just a state of paralysis. That's all that is. And I want people who follow me or watch me, I want you to be knowledgeable because with knowledge is power. Um, but American Airlines Flight 77 was a Boeing 757 223 bus. The registration number was N64 4AA. The aircraft was built in 1991. In May of 91, it was delivered to American Airlines from uh, the Boeing manufacturer. Now, the crew aboard Flight 77 was Captain Charles Burlingame, First Officer David Charles Waugh. The purser was Renee May, and the flight attendants were Michelle Heidenberger, Jennifer Lewis, and Kenneth Lewis. Now, Flight 77 had a capacity of 188 passengers, but there were 58 passengers on September 11th, in which the load factor was 33%. The average load factor for the month of September, according to American Airlines, is about 48%. On Tuesdays, by the way, it is the um, it's the same load factor on Tuesdays in the previous 3 months, according to the staff monograph of the four flights of civil aviation by the National Commission on Terrorist Attacks or the 9/11 Commission, as well as American Airlines. Um, so let's go to the boarding of the planes. So between the hours of 7:15 to 7:18 a.m., Majed Makid and Khalid al Midar, had checked in at the American Airlines ticket counter at Washington Dulles International Airport. This is coming from the 9/11 Commission report on page 2 and 3, as well as the FBI interviews of Dulles Airline employees, as well as ticket agents, one of them being Vaughn Alex. The Federal Aviation Administration has a computer system in place, which I mentioned before. It's called CAPS, CAPPS, which identifies passengers most likely requiring additional security by airport security. Now, the CAP system selected both men, Majid Makid and Khalid al-Mihdhar, but the only consequence is that Majid Makid's luggage is not loaded on Flight 77 until after boarding is confirmed. Now, Dulles Airport has surveillance cameras monitoring its security checkpoints, unlike Newark, unlike Logan. Now, there is video out there. There's only one video that is from the Vornix screening of the Dulles Airport security screening. This was I think the East checkpoint. Now, that was through a FOIA request by a law firm called Motley Rice. Motley Rice is representing the victims' families for September 11, 2001, some of them anyway. Now, this video basically doesn't have a timestamp, and that's basically because the security cameras basically don't have a timestamp because they want to see the faces of the people as they come forward to the camera, because the camera is stationed up high, it's faced very low, and it shows the people coming in through the entrance security checkpoint, goes through security. There's two waves of security, and then there's the metal screener, and you could see there's a guard right there with a wand. That's the additional security by CAPS. So, but there is other video that wasn't released to the public that I am privy to, as well as certain researchers like Nelson Martins and two others, that I have 10 other videos that have not been made public. The only time we have seen video evidence as other is the Patreon account of DJ Thermal Detonator. Now, what I'm going to do in the future is upload these other videos. I believe I have permission to. The person who gave it to me asked me not to post them, but that was, I think, 6 months ago. But there was other video showing the hijackers coming into the airport, as well as the victims of Flight 77 coming into the airport as well. But I digress. Now, this camera that's made public by Motley Rice shows one victim. Her name is Marie Ray Sopper. Marie Ray Sopper is very distinct, is that she's wearing a white shirt, gray blouse, and she's carrying a red animal basket, a cargo holder that is holding her cat. And if you ever see the video, she's in the very beginning. Her mother, Marion Kiminek, who I've met through Facebook, basically uploaded that video. DJ Thermal Detonator, Nelson Martins, has also uploaded the video. And you could see her passing through security checkpoint. And right behind her is Majid Makid and Khalid al-Mihdhar. Because there are people in the 9/11 truth community going back 15 years saying, because there's no timestamp, we don't know when this video took place, even if it's legitimate. Well, yes, the video is legitimate. Marie Kaminik basically said that's her daughter in the video. And of course, it was released through a FOIA request by Motley Rice. The video is legitimate. So both men go through and they have carry-on bags, which failed to set off any alarms. But both men set off the alarm when they passed through the first metal detector. They are directed to a second metal detector where Khalid al-Mihdhar passes, but Majid Makid fails again. And he's subjected to a personal screening with a metal detector hand wand. And you could see in that video by Motley Rice, you could see the hand wand of Majid Makid. This time he's cleared and permitted to pass through the checkpoint. At about 7:25 to 7:36 a.m., it is estimated by the 9/11 Commission report that Hani Hanjour, the alleged pilot of Flight 77, is checked in at the American Airlines ticket counter, and that's coming from FBI monographs as well as interviews with American Airlines employees. That he went to the ticket counter between the hours of 7:25 a.m. and minutes of 7:25 a.m. to 7:35 a.m. Now, here's the thing: American Airlines said they are unable to locate information confirming his check-in time. That's interesting. Everybody who checks in with their boarding pass, with their ticket count, I'm sorry, the ticket counter, is stamped with the exact time. Don't forget that. It's an interesting anomaly that we want to follow. So, he's selected for additional security screening, but he passes under the CAPS program. Now, the final two Flight 77 hijackers are brothers Nawaf al-Hazmi and Salim al-Hazmi, and they both check in at 7:29 a.m. The customer service representative makes both of them CAP selectees because one of them provides ID without a photo and seems unable to understand English, and he finds both of them suspicious. That person is Vaughn Alex that I mentioned above. Now, the only consequence is that Salim al-Hazmi's luggage is not loaded onto the plane until it is confirmed he is boarded. Now, the surveillance cameras monitor the security checkpoints at Dulles. And according to the commissioner's review of security checkpoints, Hani Hanjour passes through the main terminal's west security screening at 7:35 a.m. That's the video I have. And he proceeds through the metal detector without setting off any alarms. And his two carry-on bags set off no alarms, which were placed on the X-ray belt to see if there's any suspicious items in it. And the al-Hazmis arrive at the same checkpoint 1 minute later, right behind him. Now, Salim clears the metal detector. He's permitted through the checkpoint. Nawaf al-Hazmi sets off the alarms for the first and second metal detector hand wand before being passed. He has a shoulder bag, which is swiped by an explosive trace detector, and it is returned to him without any further inspection. Now, immediately after the attacks, the Federal Aviation Administration's local civil aviation security office had investigated the security screening at Dulles, and it found that the screeners recalled nothing out of the ordinary between these five people. And they couldn't recall any of the passengers they screened having been CAP selectees. That's another strange point. Even though the 9/11 Commission report would later conclude that the al-Hazmi brothers, their passports were indeed suspicious and could have been linked to Al-Qaeda. But it didn't explain how or why. Now, that's coming from the Baltimore Sun article dated January 27th, 2004. Now, I'm not going to talk about the sixth hijacker yet, Pure Palm, because I'm going to leave that in the conspiracy part of this talk at the end. I'll talk about the anomalies, I promise. But I want to get through the details first, the technical details, that which we can prove. Now, at 8:20 a.m., Flight 77 departed Dulles 10 minutes after its scheduled time of 8:10 a.m. And we have the audio of the air traffic control recording from Indianapolis Center that cleared Flight 77 for takeoff.
77, your departure frequency will be 125.0.
That came in pretty bad. Let me try that again.
your departure frequency will be 125.05, runway 30, clear for takeoff.
555, clear for takeoff, runway 30, American 77.
Okay, that's the authorization for takeoff per the air traffic control recording. Again, if anybody here wants to download the entire audio of the ATC, go to archive.org. They have it in an MP3 file. However, the ATC recordings are also available on YouTube. There is a guy who goes by the name Pan. He uploaded all the ATC audio with timestamps, and I suggest you watch that or hear that. That's the audio I'm going to be playing for you because it's very clear. Okay, now there were 53 passengers on board, as I said, 26 men, 22 women, 5 children, ranging from the ages of 3 to 11. Hani Hanjour was seated in 1B. Salim Al-Hazmi and Nawaf Al-Hazmi were seated in first class, seats 5E and 5F. Majid Makid and Khalid Al-Midar were seated further back in 12A and 12B in economy class. Flight 77 left the gate on runway 30 at Dulles at 8:20, and you heard the flight controller at Indianapolis, authorized for takeoff. Now, at around the same time that they got cruising altitude of 35,000 feet, American Airlines Flight 11 had slammed into the north face of the tower at 8:46 a.m., which was reported on the Indianapolis Traffic Control Center.
23. Indy Northwest 115, 390, smooth.
Northwest 1. Northwest 115, Eddie Center, roger. And at 299, turn 15 degrees to the left, extra short traffic.
15 left, 299.
American.
Now, it is reported by the 9/11 Commission report that it's estimated that the flight was hijacked between 8:51 and 8:54 a.m., shortly after 11 struck the North Tower, and not too long after Flight 175 was hijacked. Now, this is the last transmission from the flight crew of 77 to Indianapolis Center.
American 77, clear direct Falmouth.
Direct Falmouth, American 77, thanks.
That's the last audio from Charles Burlingame. And in just a minute after that audio, it's alleged the hijacking begins.
2493, 350.
American 2493, Andy Center, roger. Options 445, squawk 3761.
3761, option 445. Andy Southwest 465, 350, and smooth.
Immediately after, Indianapolis Center attempted to make contact with 77, but got no response.
American 77, Indy.
Indianapolis, good morning, Arcana 579 with you, 350 for 390.
About a minute later, Indianapolis Center calls American Airlines dispatch about Flight 77 not responding to radio calls, or it's also called NORDO.
American dispatch, Jim McDonald.
This is Indianapolis Center. Trying to get a hold of American 77.
Indy, hang on 1 second, please.
What?
Hang on 1 second, sir.
All right.
What are you trying to get a hold of?
American 77
Okay.
on frequency 120.27.
120.
0.27. We were talking to him, and all of a sudden it just.
Okay. All right, we'll get a hold for you.
All right.
They got no answer after that. Now, unlike the other 3 flights, there were no reports of anyone being stabbed or a bomb threat, and the pilot was possibly not immediately killed, but herded to the back of the plane with the rest of the passengers. At 8:54 a.m., the plane flew in the vicinity of Pike County, Ohio, and began to deviate from its normal assigned flight path and turn south. Two minutes later, at 8:56, the plane's transponder is switched off, and the hijackers set the flight's autopilot on course heading towards Washington, D.C. I forgot to mention, Flight 77 was taking off out of Dulles, and its destination was LAX Airport or Los Angeles International Airport. Now, as 175 slammed into the South Tower at 9:03, Henderson Vortak, which is the radio navigational aid for aircraft piloting in Henderson, West Virginia, inquires about Flight 77. Listen.
Stay close.
This is Henderson, American 77. Do you guys have radar on him? Is he over Falmouth or?
No, we just moved the track there. We never, you know.
All right, you just have the track out
You
there.
guys never been able to raise him at all?
No, we called company. They can't even get a hold of him. So there's no radio communications and no radar. So,
And his last clearance, as far as you know, was on course to Falmouth and then J134, right? Well, we're just going to treat him like non-radar, and we've already told the next sector they're going to have to sterilize for him until we find out.
okay, thanks.
Okay. Now, two people on board the aircraft make phone calls to contacts on the ground. The first one was made at 9:12 a.m. and it involved flight attendant and purser Renee May, who called her mother, Nancy May, in Las Vegas. During the call, which had lasted approximately 2 minutes, Renee May said that her flight was being hijacked by 6 people. Was she mistaken? Could be. Or was there a 6th hijacker? We'll get into that. Renee May also told her mother that they had been forced to the rear of the airplane. But she didn't explain whether the people crowded together were crew members, passengers, or both. She asked her mother to contact American Airlines, in which Renee and her husband did. However, American Airlines was already aware that there was a hijacking. Now, between 9:16 and 9:26 a.m., passenger Barbara Olson called her husband, U.S. Solicitor General Theodore Olson, and reported that the airplane had been hijacked and the assailants had box cutters and knives. Now, she called a number of times, one using a cell phone, using an airphone. Twice she called collect using a credit card for the airphone, in which she called the secretary, which is where Ted Olson worked, which put her through to Ted Olson. Now, sometimes the call would go through to the secretary, but would hang up. Ted Olson contacted the command center of the Department of Justice and tried to contact Attorney General John Ashcroft, but with no avail. After the first call, 5 minutes later, Barbara Olson called again and told her husband, the pilot, whoever it was on the cabin intercom, tried to address the passengers and unwittingly reached air traffic controllers and had announced the plane was hijacked. Now, whoever was at the pilot, whether it's Hani Hanjour or somebody else, radio in to the plane, but not to air traffic control. He didn't make the mistake that Ziad Jarrah made allegedly, or that Muhammad Atta made allegedly. And she told Ted Olson, "What do I tell the pilot to do?" Now, what does that mean? Now, according to some 9/11 conspiracy theorists, they're saying, well, isn't the pilot up front or is she up front? Is the pilot Charles Burlingame in the back? Well, what would she tell him? But maybe she was saying that she was going to go up and tell the pilot what to do. I don't know what to make of it. It's a very vague statement. However, to make matters worse, Ted Olson told her of the truth that planes had crashed into the World Trade Center. And Barbara Olson absorbed the news quietly, knowing probably what was going to happen to her. And according to Ted Olson, she basically couldn't speak anymore because I think she was in shock, and that she told him I loved him. And the call was cut off. At 9:29, the autopilot is disengaged and the manual control of the plane begins again. Henderson Vortak, inquires again about American 11 and now 77, not knowing that American 11 has already crashed.
Stay close.
All right, this is Henderson.
Okay.
There was an American 11 departed off of New York going to LA, got hijacked.
Bobcat Moorfield 90.
77 departed off of Dallas, is going to LA. Dispatch doesn't know where he's at.
910 Charity.
Confirmed that 2 airplanes have been that crashed into the World Trade Center in New York. So as far as American
Bobcat
77,
Moorfield
we don't
91.
know where he is, but they say that American 11 that was hijacked off of a New York airport going to LAX. And
So we don't have a track on him? I mean, like they just took off without a clearance?
No, you mean American 11?
Yeah.
95.
He's well, I'm guessing he did because he was going to LA.
But nobody ever tracked American 11 is what I'm asking.
I don't know that. I don't know
okay.
if where he left from or.
There's no flight plan in the machine right now?
Yeah, I just looked at that too. But as far as what we know, that's all we know. I talked to dispatch and that's what they relayed. And they confirmed it here that I guess 2 airplanes about crashed into the trade center. All right.
Okay, so with the hijackers now in control manually of the plane, they start slowly speeding up. The speed is up to 300 miles an hour, according to the National Transportation Safety Board report of American Airlines Flight 77, which I will provide in the description box for you to have, as well as a number of other reports. As the airplane, well, let me reiterate. At about 9:01 a.m., the White House Counterterrorism National Security Counsel, Richard Clark, is at a conference 3 blocks away from the White House when a telephone call alerts him to the crisis, and he runs to the car and he activates the Counterterrorism Security Group, or the CSG, and he says, "I'll be there in less than 5." Now, the Counterterrorism Security Group comprises the leaders of the government's counterterrorism and security agencies. And Clark drives straight to the White House. But he won't be there long because as the plane 77 gets closer to Washington, D.C., they commit an evacuation, as well as the Capitol. At about 9:08 a.m., flight control managers had banned aircraft from flying near the cities in New York and Washington, D.C. All takeoff and landings in New York are halted as soon as Flight 175 crashed into the South Tower. And then Washington, Boston, and Newark follow suit minutes later. After Flight 175, this is something else. When Flight 175 hit the South Tower, there was an NBC News correspondent named Jim Milazewski who was heading down the hall inside the Pentagon when he runs into a Defense Department official. Now, this is coming from Jim Milazewski's own testimony regarding what was now known as a terrorist attack. And this is also coming from the book Covering Catastrophe by Allison Gilbert on page 43, in which she reports that Milazewski told him that the Pentagon official told Jim Milazewski that he doesn't know anything specific about what's going on, but tells the NBC News correspondent Milazewski, quote, "If I were you, I would stay off the E-ring, which is the outermost corridor of the Pentagon. Stay away from this area because we're probably next." And according to Jim Milazewski, he didn't have any specific information, but that was just his gut instinct. Now, the Pentagon, for those who don't know, has always been a threat for terrorism activity. Now, there was a project in October of 2001 called Moscow. Pentagon Moscow, or the Pentagon Mass Casualty Project, which was a contingency exercise that was held in the office of the Secretary of Defense, Donald Rumsfeld, in the conference room. And it was running between October 24th to 26th in the year 2000. Now, get this. The exercise required emergency response teams from the state and federal level, members of the Defense Protective Services, and U.S. government officials to conduct emergency simulations in preparation for a possible plane attack on the Pentagon. That is just 11 months prior to the September 11th attacks. Now, what does that tell you, right? Does it say that they knew September 11th was going to happen? Or that they had intelligence that the Pentagon was a target for an attack by a plane coming from signals intelligence agency like the NSA or the CIA, which would mean foreknowledge? Or did they get chatter, which was made over the years, about the Pentagon being a terrorist, wanting to be a victim of a terrorist attack, or suspected to be a victim of a terrorist attack? Now, in 1996, not to dissuade from the topic, but I think it's relevant, in 1996, with the Pachinko plot, with the interrogation of Abdul Hakim Murad, he revealed a second part of the plot where they were going to hijack 10 planes and crash them into a number of U.S. targets, one of them including the Pentagon. The others were the World Trade Center, U.S. Capitol, Sears Tower, a nuclear facility, CIA Langley headquarters, and the Golden Gate Bridge. Well, let's get back to at hand. Now, Washington Approach Control is contacted by Dulles Approach Control about an unknown aircraft on a fast approach to the White House. This information would come from the U.S. Secret Service.
Hey, this is Dulles Approach Control. We're tracking a fast-moving primary heading towards the White House. The White House has been advised.
All right, I'll tell him. Yeah.
Now, according to Daniel O'Brien, who's an air traffic controller at Dulles, according to her, and this is coming from an article dated October 24, 2001, from ABC News. Headliner, Air Traffic Controllers Recall 9/11. Quote, the speed, the maneuverability, the way he turned, we all thought in the radar room, all of us experienced air traffic controllers, that was a military plane. You don't fly a 757 in that manner. It's unsafe, end quote. Now, to the 9/11 Truth Movement, they're saying, oh, you see, this wasn't a hijacked plane, that this was a military plane made to maybe a missile plane made to look like American Airlines. Well, no. What she said was the truth. Planes aren't supposed to come in at such a low level flying at that speed. Now, there's right to the south of the Pentagon is an airport called Ronald Reagan International Airport. Now, they come in for a landing. It's near the Pentagon, but they get, I forgot the, there's regulations, air traffic space where they have to get permission to fly near the Pentagon. But this plane wasn't coming near the Pentagon at the time, but it was flying near that airspace, and it wasn't contacting anyone. So when this plane was coming in, air traffic controllers and radio dispatch were all warning, saying, wow, look at this plane. It's coming in real fast. Because when they're coming into Ronald Reagan International Airport, they're getting approval from the radio tower to come in at so-and-so altitude, to come in at so-and-so speed. So they're coming in for a landing, which would mean slower. But as they're coming in for a landing, Flight 77 wasn't landing. And they were coming in at a very high speed. Now, Ronald Reagan Airport controllers asked a passing Air National Guard Lockheed C-130's Hercules to identify and follow the aircraft. Now, the pilot is an individual by the name of Stephen O'Brien, and he's a lieutenant colonel of the Minnesota Air National Guard. And then he reports back that the plane that he was looking at from his window told him it was either a 757 or 767, and that it had silver fuselage, and that it meant it was probably an American Airlines jet. I'm going to see if I can find the audio for that. Play it for you. But I may not have that audio, which is not hard to find, but it is difficult now because a lot of these channels are basically taken down. But he was interviewed on Eyewitness News. So let's play that audio.
Today, we're learning more about the confusion and the chaos on 9/11.
Now, you heard some of it in the audio tapes of hijackers at the top of the hour. Minnesota was one of the first to see.
You just wonder, how you can be in two places that geographically separate at those exact times and witness both those events. Now, the first
Lieutenant Colonel O'Brien, as most military pilots will, speaks calmly, even about one of the most horrific events in this nation's history. He saw firsthand the end of American Flight 77 and United 93.
Reagan Airport controllers then vectored an unarmed National Guard C-130H cargo aircraft, which had just taken off en route to Minnesota, to identify and follow the suspicious aircraft.
Air traffic controllers asked O'Brien if he saw American 77. He did. In fact, the plane passed directly in front of the Minnesota National Guard C-130.
We told them that we did have them in sight, and then shortly after that, they asked us if we would follow that airplane and tell them what the airplane was doing, and that's very unusual. In 20-some years of flying, I've never been asked, to do something like that before,
right.
Especially for a commercial airliner.
O'Brien speaks of an unusually clear and beautiful summer day along the East Coast, but the splendor of that summer morning ultimately gave a more clear view of the first horrific sight of this day.
We were having a hard time keeping it in sight, and finally all we saw was a big explosion on the ground.
American 7.
So he saw the explosion as he was tracking Flight 77. And then air traffic control were getting outside reports that a 757 had hit the Pentagon.
I don't know if you heard, but we had a crash into the Pentagon by a 737. I think it's 737 or 757. Shut down all arrivals in the National Airport.
In the Pentagon, national shutdown.
Right.
Okay, now there's a national shutdown. That's coming from the reports of the Secret Service. Now, about 3 minutes later, there's a nationwide ground stop that went into effect, and that also at the same time, it's confirmed Flight 77 had crashed into the Pentagon by Indianapolis Air Traffic Control.
Everybody is 62 line. Yeah, that guy hit the Pentagon. We stopped everything everywhere. They tell us.
Go ahead.
That guy hit the Pentagon. Jesus Christ.
Oh, my gosh.
I know it. Just watch out. We're not taking any traffic in anything around us.
Okay. Now, according to the Arlington County After Action Report, which I'm going to provide in the description box, as well as the 9/11 Commission Report, but this report, the Arlington County After Action Report, is the most important because that's the report coming from the Arlington County Fire Department. Now, I interviewed personally the Pentagon Incident Commander, who is the fire chief for Arlington, James Schwartz, who helped with the report, as well as co-author a book called Firefight: Inside the Fight to Save the Pentagon, which is the best book about the Pentagon and 9/11 in the world. And I recommend that book to you if anybody wants to read what happened. It is a detailed book. It's based on all testimony of people who were there from the Pentagon, from Arlington, from Fort Myer, from the Montgomery and Fairfax Search and Rescue, dozens and dozens of agencies, over 3,000 people who worked at the federal, state, and local levels that were involved with the search and rescue of the Pentagon. Flight 77, according to the report, was 5 miles west-southwest of the Pentagon and made a 330-degree spiral turn clockwise. Now, I'll speak about that in the anomaly section because there are 9/11 people, truthers, that believe that that circle that they made was impossible for an amateur pilot. It's not. Flight 77, when it impacted the Pentagon, hit the Pentagon at 531 miles an hour. And it impacted the west side of the Pentagon in Arlington County, Virginia at 9:37 a.m. The plane hit the Pentagon at the first floor level. And at the moment of impact, the plane rolled slightly to the left where the right wing was elevated. And the front part of the fuselage had disintegrated on impact. And the mid and tail sections moved for a fraction of a second, with the tail section debris penetrating furthest into the building, which disintegrated. In all, the airplane took 0.8 of a second to fully penetrate the west wall of the Pentagon and penetrate 310 feet. 0.8 of a second. Now, imagine just being in the back of the plane, which is where all the passengers were. And then all of a sudden, in 0.8 of a second, You impact the Pentagon and then go 300 feet from the explosion into the back of C Ring near A&E Drive, which is where, according to Fairfax and Montgomery Search and Rescue and the FBI, where the human remains of most of the passengers were found because they were hurted in the back. So just imagine, here's the west wall, here's the wall of the Pentagon. The nose of the plane impacts the Pentagon. The back of the plane, which is right here, all into one and travels into C Ring of the Pentagon, into A&E Drive, and that's where the parking lot is. And that's where it made that hole, as you can see, the exit hole, where the fuselage and the landing gear is located. Most of the plane is not based outside of that hole. It landed on the inside of the C Ring. And that's coming from the Pentagon renovation project headed by Lee Evey, in which he wrote a report. And it's also in the Arlington after action report, where most of the plane debris landed on the inside of the wall of the C Ring. In all, there were 189 people that were killed, including 125 people in the Pentagon building, in addition to the 84 people in the aircraft. When it came to the search and rescue and the recovery teams of the human remains, which involved dozens of agencies, including Fort Myer Fire Department, Ronald Reagan Airport Fire Department, Fort Belvoir Fire Department, Arlington Fire Department, Fairfax Search and Rescue, Montgomery Search and Rescue, the FBI, FEMA, Pentagon Police, Pentagon EMS. It was the largest investigation in its history at that time. The fatalities at the Pentagon included 55 military personnel and 70 civilians. Of those killed, 92 were on the first floor, 31 were on the second floor, and 2 were on the third. The U.S. Army suffered 75 fatalities, 53 civilians, 22 soldiers. The U.S. Navy suffered 42 casualties, 9 civilians, 33 sailors. And of course, there was a number of people, including 87 eyewitness accounts of either witnessing the plane, hearing the plane, or witnessing the plane crash into the Pentagon. 55 reports of seeing the plane clip light poles. 31 reports of people smelling jet fuel at the Pentagon. 24 people were injured by jet fuel, burned, including Lieutenant Brian Birdwell of the Department of Navy, in which he suffered 65-degree burns over his body. First-degree burns, by the way. And he was a lucky sort because before the Pentagon was hit, he was in a conference room with about 8 people watching the TV, watching what was unfolding in New York. And while this was going on, he went to the bathroom. When he stepped out of the bathroom, which is about 20 feet away from the conference room, he took a cigarette. When he did that, Flight 77 impacted the Pentagon's West Wing, and he was near the tail section. That's where the fuel is. Next thing he knew, he was on the floor looking up, and then he heard an explosion. The wind had knocked him down, and he felt a tingling sensation like pins and needles all throughout his body. The military shirt and pants that he was wearing had grafted into his skin due to the heat. So in other words, his shirt and pants basically melted into his body. And when he went to Dover Medical Unit, when they grabbed him out, they had to regraft his skin. He's alive, but everybody that was in the conference room were killed. There were a number of people that didn't die from the blast of the plane. They died due to asphyxiation. Now, when I interviewed James Schwartz, the Pentagon incident commander for my podcast, The Darkened Hour, I asked him about this, that there were individuals that didn't have burn marks, and they were found in their seats. Some were even sitting down on the floor, looked like they were comfortable or something. And he said that when the plane had impacted near the impact point, anyone near the impact point died either from the impact or they died from suffocation. Because when the plane had impacted the first floor, the jet fuel went all out the first, second, and third floors. But most of it went through the first floor. And because there was the ensuing explosion, the fireball, that went 300 feet to the north and south of the Pentagon. Picture that. 300 feet. That is the size of a baseball field. Almost the entire west wing of the first floor. So the fire basically absorbed all oxygen. And these people, because of the impact of the plane and due to the resulting explosion of the fireball, basically these people suffocated to death. Most of the fatalities came like that. One eyewitness to the airplane impact was Omar Campos, who's a Pentagon maintenance worker. And he was on the side of the road when he said, quote, "I was cutting the grass and it came in screeching over my head. I felt the impact. The whole ground shook and the whole area was full of fire. I could never imagine I would see anything like that here." USA Today reporter Mike Walters said as he was driving on Washington Boulevard, quote, "I looked out my window and I saw this plane. It was an American Airlines jet coming. And I thought, this doesn't add up. It's really low. And I saw it. I mean, it was like a cruise missile with wings. It went right there and slammed into the Pentagon," end quote. Now, look, I could read you 87 eyewitness reports of actually what people who were there who saw the plane hit the Pentagon. I'm going to provide that listing in the description. So, what about the search and rescue operations? Well, Arlington County Fire Department, where they got there within 7 minutes. And the chief, the assistant chief of the Arlington County Fire Department, James Schwartz, implemented an incident command center to coordinate response efforts among the multiple agencies that were arriving shortly. And approximately, according to Schwartz's interview, it took about an hour to set up a command post. Now, there was already people who were there, including 3 Fort Myer firefighters who were at the heliport of the Pentagon. And they all saw the plane coming right at them. I've written a number of articles on Medium about this, and I did a video or an audio on YouTube, which you could listen to. It's in my playlist, about their testimonies about ducking under a car to get out of the way of the plane that slammed into the Pentagon, because they were already at the heliport. There's a fire station at the Pentagon. There's also a small air traffic control center near the Pentagon, and the employee was Sean Boger, and he ducked under his desk as the plane crashed into the Pentagon. He saw the plane coming, and he thought it was going to hit him. And by the time he got up, it was already a massive devastation and explosion. Now, the firefighters, they attempted to extinguish the fires right away, but the Pentagon roof line, when it was under renovation, now, again, I have to mention this. The Pentagon was under renovation, and it started in 1997. I want to say 97. It was headed by Lee Evey. Remember I mentioned his name previously. It's the Pentagon Renovation Project Team. And this is I think it was a 5-year project that was going to basically solidify the Pentagon, because in 1996, we had the Oklahoma City bombing. I'm sorry, April of 95, in which the Murrah building, the Alfred P. Murrah building, when the bomb went off in the Ryder truck, which was stationed outside, the explosion happened and knocked off all the wood. People died. More people died from the blast coming into the building due to debris landing into their bodies, their face, their upper body, and there's a lot of windows. So the Pentagon renovation project was basically trying to replace all the windows of the Pentagon with blast-resistant windows. And if you could find pictures, now there's some pictures where they show before the collapse of the roof line of the impact point, where you could see on the 3rd floor, even on the 2nd floor, some of the windows had survived, but not by the impact point. But they survived the blast, which was intended to do. Now, I've uploaded the Pentagon renovation report by Lee Evey on my YouTube, and he explains in full about what the windows were made of, including the walls, what they were made of, and how they basically helped during the impact of the plane lessen the casualties. And it did work, because there were people that were on the 3rd floor by the West Wing that weren't killed because the walls didn't cave in, much like the Oklahoma City bombing, the Murrah building, in which you saw the entire facade, 2/3 of the building was gone. So that was what the Pentagon renovation project was based off of, because that was a federal building. So the roof line of the Pentagon was made of horsehair, and that's what sparked the fire to go trying to spread into the east and to the south of the roof line. But the firefighters that were there, Arlington County and Fort Myer, they started putting holes on top of the roof line so the fire can get, so that it could escape out. When Arlington County firefighters and Fort Myer firefighters were near the impact, they heard the impact point making increasing noises, and they said the West Wing is going to collapse. And so when the officials saw a cornice of the building move, that means whatever remaining beams that were holding it were giving out. They ordered an evacuation. And at 10:10 a.m., the upper floors of the damaged area had collapsed. And the collapsed area was about 100 feet at its widest point and 50 feet at the deepest. And that's coming from, again, the after-action report of Arlington County. After that collapse, the fires intensified because all this oxygen was coming in and spreading all throughout the floors. 5 floors. There's 5 floors of the Pentagon. And now there was a whole bunch of firefighters coming in. They're fighting the fire. And the firefighters made fire breaks in the roof, like I said before, to prevent the spread. At about midday the next day, Arlington County issued a press release, which I have uploaded into YouTube, stating that the fire was controlled but not extinguished totally. There were small fires that were coming out because electrical lines were exposed, plus there's jet fuel they had to deal with. And so during the search and rescue, they found various pieces of the aircraft. One such individual was Navy Command Center Lieutenant Kevin Schaefer, who was a cameraman. When he observed a chunk of the aircraft's nose cone and pieces of the landing gear near the service road between rings B and C up against the wall. Like I said to you before, that's where most of the debris was at. And that would make sense because the back of the plane is basically now against the inside of the wall of C ring. On September 14th, Fairfax County Urban Search and Rescue members Carlton Berghammer and Brian Morovitz, they came across an intact seat from the plane's cockpit. And that's coming from an news article from MSNBC called Washington's Heroes on the Ground at Pentagon on September 11th. But they also found the flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder. However, the cockpit voice recorder basically was totally destroyed. No data was saved. The flight data recorder, they got some information, not everything. The black boxes, which is the flight data recorder, the cockpit voice recorder, was near the punch-out hole in A&E Drive. C-ring. Investigators also found a part of Nawafa Hazmi's driver's license in the north parking lot rubble pile. That's where they put the plane debris. According to James Schwartz, they took all the plane debris and put it in the north parking lot, which is outside of the Pentagon West Wall. That's the rubble pile for the plane debris. The other debris was basically pushed to the side near A&E Drive. So, they have two different debris piles. The Army engineers determined on September 11th by evening that no survivors remained in the damaged section of the impact point. Army soldiers from Fort Belvoir, including Fairfax Search and Rescue, Montgomery Search and Rescue, led the search for human remains, which were identified by the FBI. And those remains went to Dover Mortuary. Which was, of course, led by an FBI agent there. And let me think of her name. I'm trying to remember her name. But I tend to forget names real quick. Because I have a lot of names in my head. And I know I have her name somewhere. Tara Bloch from the Washington, D.C. FBI unit. Tara Bloch. She ran the morgue at Dover Mortuary. People who were in charge of photographing were Jen Hill. She was a photographer who helped document evidence and remains. FBI from Washington, D.C., Special Agent Garrett McKenzie, and Special Agent Tom O'Connor, who's one of the supervisors in charge of evidence recovery, including human remains, and Special Agent Mark Whitworth, who was the lead for the black box and other key evidence of the plane debris. When the cockpit voice recorder was identified by the NTSB, because they had to get the National Transportation Safety Board to come and identify it, and they did. Now they got, according to the report, which I'll provide in the description, the Fairchild aviation recorders was an A100 cockpit voice recorder, which was a device that which records on magnetic tape. And according to the NTSB, no usable segments of tape were found inside the recorder. On the other hand, all the data from the flight data recorder, which used a solid state drive, much more stable, was recovered. And they were able to get the technical data off that. There is security camera video, but it doesn't show the plane going into the Pentagon because it is a frame-by-frame camera. And all you could see was a thin white blur because the plane is going 530 miles an hour. Now, let's get into the anomalies, shall we? Because this is the most divisive issue in all of 9/11 when it comes to 9/11 truth movement. So let's talk about the most divisive issue. 1, no evidence that a plane had crashed into the Pentagon. According to fringe conspiracy theorists, not conspiracy theorists, fringe conspiracy theorists, those who are led by speculation and falsehoods, they claim that there was no plane debris at the Pentagon lawn or anywhere in the building. That's not true. There was much plane debris, but it was very little. It was in a million pieces. There is no tail. There is no wing. There are no whole engines. There are no whole bodies. Why? We see them in other plane crashes, according to them. Well, I ask you people in the room who are watching this, why are we not seeing large pieces of the plane? Now, it may be befuddling to you, too. We should be able to see a wing, a tail, an engine at least. That's the heaviest part of the plane. Why? Because most plane crashes, which are, by the way, rare instances, but most plane crashes are not intentional plane crashes. They're actually planes who are actually trying to land with an actual pilot trying to land on the belly of the plane with the lowest speeds possible. And that's why in most plane crashes, you see giant pieces of the plane, including the wings and the engines, even large pieces of the fuselage, the nose. Now, what's the difference between what happened at the Pentagon and most plane crashes? Well, at the Pentagon, we saw an even much more rare instance, an intentional plane crash. An intentional plane crash with a plane which is holding 78,000 pounds of fuel, going at a speed of 531 miles an hour, crashing into a hard surface like the Pentagon. What's going to happen? Well, an ensuing explosion, which rose twice the size of the building. That's what we saw on the video camera. And according to the eyewitnesses who were outside the building, they saw a plane crash into the Pentagon. Now, I don't need video to know what happened because, one, we see physical plane inside the Pentagon, outside the Pentagon, as evident by the eyewitnesses who were at the Pentagon. And we have 87 people identified a plane crashing into the Pentagon. The plane debris that was found at the Pentagon was identified by Montgomery Search and Rescue, Fairfax Search and Rescue, the FBI, Fort Belvoir Army, and the National Transportation Safety Board, hundreds of people who identified the plane as Flight 77, according to the technical data that was saved by the flight data recorder, which I just reiterated to you, showed the trajectory of the plane coming from Dulles on track into the Pentagon, which was witnessed by the C-130 pilot, Stephen O'Brien, as well as air traffic control at Indianapolis, who monitored the radar. Even though with the transponder turned off, they could still monitor the plane. The radar track was from Dulles to the Pentagon. If you're willing to say all of this is fabricated or manipulated, good luck proving it. When you do, let me know, so this way I can make the correction. But the overwhelming evidence is that Flight 77 crashed into the Pentagon. Because of your incredulity to the matter at heart doesn't mean that a hypothesis without any evidence is valid. Speculation also is not a form of evidence, which is what many people do. Now, this is a huge divisive issue in the 9/11 Truth Movement. The second point, the 9/11 Commission Report and any government agency is a liar. Granted, I will submit to you that yes, some people will lie to produce a narrative that fits with a government explanation. However, unless you're willing to provide evidence for the claim that everybody at the Pentagon, from the state, local, and federal level, that's over 2,000 people, including the person I interviewed, the Pentagon Incident Commander, James Schwartz, as well as everybody from the Department of the Navy, the Department of the Army, Fairfax Search and Rescue, Montgomery Search and Rescue, Fort Belvoir Fire Department, Fort Myer Fire Department, Ronald Reagan Airport Fire Department, Arlington County Fire Department, FEMA, the FBI, every single body that was there in the search and rescue of human remains and plane debris, Dover Mortuary even, who is in charge of identifying the human remains of the passengers. If you're willing to suggest that the plane debris or the plane debris that was basically a drone or a missile made to look like American Airlines, all this is fabricated, including the down light poles, the technical data found at the flight data recorder, the National Transportation Safety Board would have to be in it. All these people would have to be in on it at some level. How do you do that? How do you keep that many voices? Either all of them are lying, either all of them are coerced by who, or they're all mistaken. Either one. Now, if you're saying they're all mistaken, well, let's go by the evidence that was found. Well, if you're going to say that the evidence is fabricated, prove it. Prove all the evidence is fabricated. Then we have a case. Right or wrong? 3, if you're going to say that everybody was coerced by the shadow government, so to speak, that means for the last 21 years, everybody, over 2,000 people in a month that were on the Pentagon, had to be tracked just to make sure they weren't corking anybody by a unit dedicated to the shadow government. Does that make sense to you? How is that even possible? Once you do the scientific method, once you conduct the research, you will find that when you ask a question and you perform the research and you establish your hypothesis, and you test that hypothesis by conducting an experiment, and then you make an observation based on the results of that experiment, and then you analyze the results and draw a conclusion based on the observation from conducting that experiment, and finally, you present the findings. That is the 7 steps to the scientific method. Something that is not employed by fringe conspiracy theorists of the truth movement regarding this incident and 9/11 in general. It's much easier to say that no plane crashed here and not give it an explanation. Some people would even go as far to say that I don't need to offer an explanation because I know what didn't happen here, as opposed to I know what happened here. Now, just imagine a crime scene investigator goes to a crime scene, and the first thing he says is that I know what didn't happen here, but I'm not going to explain what happened. It's not up to me. Now, would that not be preposterous? Well, why isn't it as equally preposterous to those who make these unfounded accusations and speculations and claims regarding the Pentagon? Your incredulity is not evidence to the contrary. Now, anomalies. My co-researcher and good friend, DJ Thermal Detonator, Nelson Martins, did a video, a film actually, and his most popular film, because it's been around for longer, 6 on 77, where he talks about a 6 hijacker being on board. Remember where I talked about Renee May, the purser of Flight 77, calling her mother in Las Vegas about there being 6 hijackers on a plane? Well, was she mistaken? Or did she really see 6 hijackers? Well, Nelson Marks makes a great case, and a compelling one at that, that there was a 6 hijacker, that there was a report by CNN that stated that Hani Hanjour was wearing a black shirt and black pants. However, the person that they reported as Hani Hanjour was not Hani Hanjour. His name was Mozed Kaner. Now, Mozed Kaner basically is not on the flight manifest. Who the hell is this guy? Carrying on a large black bag, himself walking hand in hand right behind the hijackers. Right behind Hani Hanjour, who's baldish. I think he was wearing a white shirt. Could be wrong about the colored shirt. Now, how did CNN make that mistake? Hani Hanjour has distinct features. Very thin, very short, balding hair. He's the only hijacker with balding hair. Interesting anomaly. For those who have not seen 6 on 77, please do. Fantastic film. Another anomaly is this. The FBI basically didn't know who was on these planes. However, according to a report and a book by Susan and Joe Trento, I sure will, actually. I see you. Let me make sure. Okay, I want to make sure because I don't want to spell it wrong. And you're looking like, what the hell is this guy talking about? And that's going to take a little bit because, damn it, I don't think I'm saying his name right. If I have to, I'm going to probably do. Yeah, I'm going to have to do this. I'm going to have to look at his film. Just to get that name for you. Tell you what, Pure Palm. Do you have a Twitter, Pure Palm? What do I know you on Twitter as? Because you know what, I don't want to waste too much time looking for this, and I'll get you the name on the side. That's what I'll do anyway. Ecom, you said, did we touch on AT&T operator who received a phone call from Olson about hijacking having a gun. Yes. In fact, thank you for that. That's a really good question. The AT&T operator is Melody Lorenzo. Let me pull that up. Melody Lorenzo, 9/11 PDF. This is an FBI report, basically. Oh, damn it. I'm going to have to pull this up somewhere. Yeah, Melody Lorenzo, AT&T operator. Let me type that, see if that works. AT&T operator. It's not coming up. Why is that? I saying her name right? Could be saying her name wrong too. Let me try and find that later, Ecom. I'll share that with you if you want on Twitter. Yes, I believe it's Melody Lorenzo. That was her name. Where she got a report from Olson suggesting that one of them has a gun. Now that's not the first time either. I shared some information regarding Flight 11, where in the American Airlines draft report suggesting that one of the hijackers had a gun. But then that wasn't that draft report was not published. A re-report was published, and it didn't mention any gun. Pure Palm, you're right. I know that Kelly Arena of CNN used that name in a broadcast on December 14th, according to the transcript, but only photographic spelling was used, and hence it was a hard name to actually triangulate. You better believe it. Mozed Kanair. I think that was his name, Mozed Kanair. I'll look it up. Just give me your Twitter handle or your email, and I'll send you that name. Yeah, I know who you're talking about. But that's another anomaly. Was he the pilot? Could be. Was there Boeing uninterruptible autopilot that the hijackers weren't aware about? That could be very well the case too. I don't know. I'm not a radio ham hock operator. I don't know anything about technical data. I heard that these Boeing airliners could not have been taken over by the Boeing uninterruptible airpilot because of the specifics, the technical specifics. I don't know for sure. So I can't really I'll talk to you about it on VK. Okay, VK, sure enough. Remind me because I have a bad memory. I'm shot mentally. So yeah, that's another anomaly. Mozed Kanair, Melody Lorenzo, report of a gun, Ted Olson. Also, another anomaly that is brought up by the 9/11 Truth Movement, the fringe conspiracy theorists, that the FBI basically admitted that the phone calls by Barbara Olson were 0 seconds. Well, first of all, they didn't use all the phone calls in the prosecution trial exhibit because, for one, they had overwhelming evidence against Zacchaeus Moussaoui anyway, and two, they didn't publish all the phone calls on the trial exhibit. They did anyway. They showed the timelines of the duration of the calls in the trial exhibits. So that's pretty disingenuous of certain people to basically profess that, oh, they showed the one phone call that lasted 0 seconds because the other names didn't come up. But basically, if you line them up, because it didn't say the name, right? Because she was calling collect. Okay? All those numbers that were calling collect came from one person, Barbara Olson. Because there were only two people that were making calls. Okay? Renee May and Barbara Olson. But the duration of the calls is what's key. This is what the fringe conspiracy theorists won't put two and two together. The same amount of time from those transcripts that were made available in the prosecution trial exhibits match up with the FBI transcripts of the duration of the calls made to Ted Olson. You don't have to believe me. This is public. Take a look for yourself. You know what? Why don't I do this? And link phone calls in the chat box here for you. Is this one? Yeah, here. Here's one. I want to do more than that. I want to give you a whole bunch. Here's Renee May. Let me give you the picture in the chat room. Here's one. That's Renee May. I'm going to just give you one Barbara Olson phone call. No, that's not. I want one. Yeah, here's another. Here's another. I'm not going to put them all there, but you could see the time stamp, and you can match them up with the FBI, with the trial transcripts. That was using it as the trial transcripts, but you can match them up with the FBI phone call duration. Basically, if you don't have that, go to scrib.com and put in FBI phone calls flight 77, and then it'll give you the whole transcript of phone calls. Or you could just probably Google that, but Google it in PDF form so you can have the whole PDF, the whole thing. So you can have that. Okay. I think I've said enough. An hour and a half here. I went longer a little bit, but because this is such a divisive issue, it's sad to see because, if fringe conspiracy theorists think there were no hijackers on these planes, who are they blaming for 9/11? Because they can't get it into their head that planes were hijacked by Arab fundamentalists. Well, that doesn't tell you that this is the whole official story, right? There's more to it. Who are the people tracking these people? Who are the intelligence agencies behind the monitoring of these hijackers? That goes back years prior to 9/11. I've made countless videos. I don't know. I have 2,470 videos uploaded on my YouTube channel. I have over 250 videos in my personal thoughts playlist. That's where I give the most technical data regarding the anomalies, the intelligence services regarding 9/11 itself. All right. I've worked 3 years on this. I'm the only person in the world to upload the 9/11 Commission Report and the Joint House Inquiry Report and break it down so you don't see a 3-hour video. Break it down to where each commission member is interviewing a specific person. It took me 7 months to upload this. It took me 8 months to edit this. It took me a year and a half. Okay. I'm not patting myself on the back. I'm just trying to make it to where you could get primary source material and data. And I'm very ornery about this because there's so much speculation, there's so much misinformation regarding 9/11. It sickens me. And this is what is most popular. It's what dominates the truth movement. And they're not getting anywhere. We're 21 years later. Are we putting anybody into court? Well, they're not. What's taking so long? If a plane didn't hit the Pentagon, my God, why isn't it in the courts? Why isn't nobody on TV? Well, they're all in on it. Well, then why have a movement? You're going to complain? The whole world's in on it? Well, that's what the fringe conspiracy theorist thinks, that everybody's in on it. If you don't believe like me, well, you're a shill too. And that's irresponsible thinking. Do I believe that, this is it? That this is the official narrative? 19 men with box cutters hijacked 4 planes and crashed them into the World Trade Center, Pentagon, Shanksville? Well, that's not everything. That's a microcosm of what happened leading up to the events of September 11th. A microcosm. There is a world of gray predating 9/11. Warnings, malfeasance, maybe even foreknowledge. I can argue that. Specifically the CIA and the NSA. I can make a great case for this. I'm even trying to get in touch with lawyers about maybe holding the director of the CIA under perjury, but statute of limitations. But I would like to make it public. What about the NSA wiretapping the phones of Osama bin Laden, some of the hijackers, including Al Qaeda communications hub in Yemen? What do you think they were talking about on these phones for years? Operations. If they're talking about operations, that means that the NSA could probably warn, say, the CIA, the State Department, about an impending attack. And if they want the attacks to happen, Well, then let's make it accommodating to where the attacks can happen. Does that sound reasonable to you? Sounds heck as reasonable to me. Most likely that is the case, but we don't know it yet. But why I do these videos and why I do these live discussions, because I'm trying to share as much information with you, and then in the hopes that maybe somewhere one of you guys, or maybe somebody that you touch, can reach much more people than me and make a real difference. Because currently we are led by people with egos, their own agendas, profiteers, disinformation artists, willing to make a buck or to remain relevant. And this is what destroyed the 9/11 Truth Movement. Because of fringe conspiracies like these. I don't want that to happen to you. I don't want you to believe me. I want you to, I want you to do your due diligence. And with the information I shared today, I want you to research. That's how I learned. I mean, I'm not an expert. I'm still learning. I'm a student of these affairs. But there are some good people out there. It's hard to find, but Ryan Dawson and Nelson Martins and Paul Thompson, Kevin Fenton, Ray Nowolski, Robbie and Abby Martin, James Corbett, John Gold, they're out there. Some of them are retired, but some of us are still here. And as long as I'm here, I'm still going to be doing these videos. I'm still going to try and share information because I want my followers, and you're not followers, you're leaders. And I want you to sit on your rear. It's, you could be learning along the way, but I want you to open your channels because you're knowledgeable. I've seen some of these names before: Pure Palm, Chip Walker, Ecom. Some of you I know personally. You guys have enough information in your heads that you can open up your channels. Look at how many wrong people open up channels and spread this disinformation, misinformation. Way too many. Way too many. Don't tell me you can't, because you can. And I got confidence in you that you can. I don't want you to be followers of me. It's good that, you come to my channel, you get some stuff that you probably haven't read before, haven't known before. But I want you to do something with it. 3 years ago, my niece came into my room and she was seeing me read a book. And she goes, well, she knows what I do. And she says, well, what are you going to do with everything? Kids say the damnedest things. And when she said that, I didn't have an answer. I had 12 years of study in this field. And I said, what, wait a minute, what am I doing? I don't have any viral media, and serious ones anyway. I didn't have a YouTube channel. I didn't have a Twitter. I didn't have a WordPress or a Medium. Well, when she said that, it gave me the authority, the motivation to want to share information in a sea of disinformation. And, I'm probably not going to make much of a difference, but if I could reach one or two people, and those two people could do better than me in reaching a bigger audience, then it was worth it. And, I'll conclude on that. And listen, thank you very much for coming on tonight. And we'll do another live discussion, probably Sunday. Today's Thursday, Sunday or Monday, and we'll talk about Flight 93, which is going to be another fun one because that has some theory I'm working on, which could lead to a groundbreaking discovery if it's right. And I think some of you people in this room know what I'm talking about, and it has to do with Ziad Jarrah. So, hey, listen. Thank you for sticking around for an hour and 34 minutes listening to me. Thank you very much for tuning into the stream. And I will see you on, let's make it Monday night. Monday night it is. Guys, have a good night and a great weekend.